There are so many good spells to choose from. I could choose that spell as well. Ooh, that's a wonderful spell. Or, since there is a horde of bloodthirsty orcs running at us, I could cast that spell. Yes, that's an excellent spell, but its radius is rather small. Of course, I might just want to use a cantrip to conserve spell slots, just in case I need them later. But that is a lot of orcs that want to murder us all. You know, I think I'll just go with good old trusty Fireball.
Yep, that's great. A bunch of orcs die. Fighter, it's your turn.
Oh yeah, I swing my sword. That's 16 to hit for 7 damage.
7 damage. Got it. Old man, it's your turn.
Oh yeah, I would like. What's going on again?
There are a bunch of orcs attacking you.
Oh yes. Well, in that case, I'll attack. Oh, that's a 4 to hit for 1 damage.
Okay, wow, that actually kills several orcs. Good job. Barbarian, your turn.
Yeah, I would like to bury my axe into my own face because this combat is stupid and boring. That's 29 to hit for 999 damage.
Are you raging?
Well, of course I'm raging. I'm always raging. I'm a very angry individual.
Well, in that case, you only deal yourself half damage and you're still alive.
Yeah, I know.
Haha, you suck.
Oh dear, can't anyone make the pain go away?
Welcome to the DM Lair. I'm Lucar, and I've been a Dungeon Master since high school. On this channel, I give practical Dungeon Master advice that you can use in your D&D games. Today in the Lair, I'll be discussing 5 ways to make your RPG combats less boring. That is, how to make them more interesting and fun for both you and your players. But first, are you a game master looking to reduce your prep time and improve the quality of your games? If so, might I recommend Lair Magazine? Lair Magazine is an RPG and D&D publication that my patrons receive every single month. Every issue contains 2 expertly written D&D 5th edition adventures with maps designed for use on virtual tabletops, and a plethora of other game master resources such as traps, puzzles, new monsters, NPCs, and adventure ideas. I want to emphasize too that the adventures are written in a way that makes them far easier and faster to prepare and run at your game tables than the official modules. They include read-aloud text, as all good pre-made adventures should, and top-notch formatting and organization to make referencing the adventure as you run the game as quick and easy as possible. Furthermore, every month my patrons also get bonus content such as map packs with even more maps to use on virtual tabletops, city tiles to create their own custom cities and towns, and can even help determine which videos I create. Become a DM Lair patron at the link below and you'll instantly get access to 2 issues of Lair Magazine, and this Thursday, the August issue will be released. And now, how to run RPG combats that aren't boring. And by the way, a couple of these points are also covered in the fine book by Alexander Makaris, Arbiter of Worlds. It's got tons of great information in it for game masters. I'll throw a link down below for those of you who are interested. Number 1, the stakes must be real. So the thing is that in today's day and age, many game masters carefully balance encounters, they fudge dice, and they change rules to ensure that players win. So the players are here thinking they're playing a game where the dice matter, where their decisions actually are important and might have consequences, and behind the scenes, the Dungeon Master is really just rearranging and changing everything to make sure that, hey, you're always gonna win. And somebody right now is gonna be like, okay, Luke, but what's the problem with that? All right, so here's the thing. If players know that they will win every single encounter, that no matter what happens, no matter how bad of a decision they make, no matter how overwhelming the odds, no matter how bad the dice rolls, if they know they will always win and everything will be just fine, that is, there are no stakes, well, it reduces the drama, the excitement, and the fun for many players. Now, I'm sure there are some players who will rest easy in the comfort of knowing that nothing bad will ever happen to their precious PC, and that every encounter, every problem will just magically be resolved involved, no matter how poorly they go about it or how bad the dice rolls are. They're just in it for the ride, I guess. But there's a whole other swath of players who will have their fun leached out of the game once they realize that their choices have no consequences. They don't matter whatsoever. The dice don't matter because the Dungeon Master is just making sure that everything happens according to the story that apparently was already written and planned out ahead of time. I, for one, think a game like that would pretty much suck. Old school D&D, back in the very beginning, was not characterized by that whatsoever. Death was very common and life was cheap. However, as the gaming progressed, right around 1984 or so, you had something happen that is referred to as the Hickman Revolution. And this represented a growing trend of removing actual risk from the game in favor of letting the players experience an ongoing narrative with the certainty that they will see it finish. So the whole idea of life is cheap and you're gonna churn through a whole bunch of PCs gradually was going away, and PCs were becoming more and more sturdy. Permanent loss and death are gradually removed from the game so that players can simply run the same character most of the game with certainty that nothing bad's gonna happen, and they can just play through the narrative and see the story unfold before them. In fact, we see that by 4th edition and certainly 5th edition, PCs are practically immortal except in the case of a true TPK, which don't happen a whole lot. Depends on the game master, of course, but they tend to be pretty rare in 5th edition. Now, this whole approach to having this ongoing narrative and story that the players can go through and see come to completion makes 100% sense if you are a novelist, if you are writing a story. You'll of course notice that this trend is referred to as the Hickman Revolution, and the Hickmans were of course novelists in the fine line of Dragonlance. Side note here, this is not intended to knock them whatsoever. They may not even like the fact that this trend was named after them, the Hickman Revolution, but it was, and that's what it's referred to, so that's what we're gonna call it. Whether they are the protagonists of it and fought for it, or whether they were just unfortunate enough to have their name attached to it and they don't like that fact, I don't know, in all honesty, but it is what it's called, and yeah, so we're just gonna roll with it. So why does this approach make sense if you're a novelist? Well, if the game master is writing a story, they want to control the plot. They want to control the characters, and they want to control the final outcome of the story or campaign. And controlling all of that is a whole lot easier when the characters don't change, when they are persistent throughout your entire story that you're writing in your tabletop RPG game. But if the outcome of combat and other situations is unknown, it is very hard to control the ongoing story. In fact, that story you have in mind with a beginning, a middle, and an end can no longer be experienced in an ongoing narrative continuous fashion when you have characters dying all the time. It introduces new elements into the game, new motivations, new things. Who knows, if half of the party dies, they might decide that, hey, this whole part of the campaign's way too hard, we're not doing it anymore, let's go somewhere else. And then everything you had planned, your entire story is just, wow, discarded, thrown aside, can't do it anymore. It's a whole lot easier if the players' characters just live and keep on going on so they can complete the whole narrative. And of course, that's from the viewpoint of the game master. There's also the viewpoint of the characters, of the players, I should say, so that they can experience an ongoing narrative of that story that the game master is unfolding before them. And this goes back to the whole question of whether the game master is a storyteller, whether you have a dynamic story that is unfolding before you, or whether everything is dictated beforehand and known beforehand by the game master. This gets into the whole idea of whether you have a directed story or an emergent story. A directive story is where the game master pretty much controls the way everything goes, and the things that the players do and their characters and all that kind of stuff has no real effect on anything in the game. It's all just smoke and mirrors. Or you have an emergent story where there is no known final destination, no known final outcome, and the decisions that the players make and the dice rolls and other elements work together to create a story as you go, and nobody really knows where it's going to end up. Okay, so if you are a novelist, it would make sense to want to have a directed story as part of your gaming group, because your goal as a novelist is to tell a story. It makes sense to design modules that way and encourage folks to run the game that way. You know, you have a pre-decided story of everything that's going to turn out this way and that way, and can't really diverge from it at all. The problem is that the game becomes less of a game when you do that. It takes away player agency when everything is predetermined by the game master. If all roads lead to Rome, then does it really matter what road players choose? No, it doesn't at all. Their choices become meaningless at some point, and they might question why they're even playing the game. Might, because there are probably lots of players out there that just don't give a flying crap and are happy to play that game. But many players want something more. And I have ranted before that the game master is not a storyteller and shouldn't be telling a story. I definitely lie on the side of emergent storytelling. I believe that a game master should create situations, allow player agency, and then based on what the players do, that's what happens. That's the story that results. You don't predetermine the results. That's not how to run a game. That's how to tell a story, not how to run a game. Now, if you're a frustrated novelist who can't get published and you want to use D&D and RPGs to tell stories, well, be aware then that you might have a group of disinterested and bored players. They probably signed up to play a game, not listen to you tell a bad story. Sorry. You probably like, Luke, what does this have to do with making combat less boring? I got you. I went on a big tangent there, but it's important. The point is, again, back to the very beginning, there need to be actual stakes. When that combat happens, there need to be stakes. If the players know that it's predetermined they're gonna win, not a big deal, then the combat is boring and uninteresting by default because they know what the result will be every single time. That doesn't mean every combat must be brutal, and doesn't have to result in life either. In the Arbiter of Worlds, Macris lays out 4 broad levels of risk: strategic position, assets, character, and party. By the way, do highly recommend that book, so you should go check it out. First one, strategic position. The circumstances of the adventure might change for the worse if the encounter is not handled well. Take the example of an orc patrol that might sound the alarm. Now, the players could easily defeat that orc patrol, but if they don't do it in time to sound that alarm, the rest of the adventure might be a whole lot more difficult when the orcs are all on alert. Assets is the second category. Survival from the combat is likely, but the PCs might lose things they value: treasure, horses, henchmen, pets, magic items, etc. Your typical run-in with a rust monster is a great example of where they're probably not gonna die, but their assets are probably at risk. The next one is risk to the character, in that an individual PC might die. The whole group is not likely to wipe, but an individual character might die in this combat. It's that rough. Of course, if you got 5th edition, does it really matter at all because raising dead is so easy in 5th edition? And the 4th level of risk is the entire party. Specifically that the entire group wipes and TPKs and they're all dead. So if you've been trusting in the fudge and ensuring that your characters always win, your players' characters of course, put something at stake in the next combat. When your players realize that they might actually lose something they value, it will get them far more engaged and interested in the combat. I have a video titled Why Defeat, Death, and TPKs Are Good for D&D that also talks about this issue of having stakes and why it makes the game better. Number 2, do not ignore the power of narration and description. All right, I'm gonna give you 2 examples of how a combat might sound at the game table here as a way to illustrate this point. Jim Bob, what'd you get over there? That's a 7 to hit for 4 damage. Yeah, 7 misses. Sarah, what'd you get?
That's a 19 to hit for 24 damage.
Sorry, voices. Oh, that's definitely a hit. Okay, 24 damage? Okay, got it. Okay, John, what'd you get?
Yeah, that's a 19 also to hit for 4 damage.
4 damage? Okay, that's good. Okay, yeah, you guys are doing some damage to the monster. The monster takes a swing at you, Jim Bob. 18 to hit, that hits for 3 damage. Okay, all right, great. What are you guys gonna do? Jim Bob, you're up next. Okay, there you go. Just by the numbers, D&D combat by the numbers. You're not describing anything, no narration, just you're doing math. You're sitting around doing math. Next example. All right, Jim Bob, what you doing? All right, I'm gonna run up to this orc and I'm gonna slash at it with my axe and curse at it. All right, what you got? You got there? It's a 7 to hit for 4 damage. Okay, yeah, sorry, that's a miss. The orc, as you slash at it, the orc ducks back under your axe, rolls around, and readies its weapon about to attack you. Oh crap, that sucks. All right, Sarah, what are you doing?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna like sneak up behind the orc and I'm gonna look for a vulnerable part of it and I'm gonna go stabby on it as hard as I can.
Okay, well, what you got over there?
That's a 19 on the attack roll, 24 damage.
Oh yeah, that's definitely a hit. You stab that orc in the back, right over here in the liver, and he grunts in pain, looks at Jim Bob, then looks at you. You pretty sure he might go after you in the next round. He did not seem to like that whatsoever. All right, John, what you got over there? Oh yeah, well, while he's distracted, got stabbed in the back, I'm gonna go up and I'm gonna kick him right between the legs. That's a 19 to hit for 4 damage. Holy crap, that's a hit. The orc's eyes roll up back in the head. He reflexively drops his weapon and grabs at himself in absolute pain. On its turn, the orc picks up its axe and takes a swing wildly around, finally managing to take a swing at Sarah and completely misses her. He's in so much pain and agony. There, we got description going on. We have some narration. You're describing things that are happening. You're envisioning this in your brain. You have some words. You're using your words. It's not just math. Now, so the natural question is, what combat would you rather be playing in? Which one is boring and which one is more interesting? RPG games are games of imagination, right? We are here to weave action and imagery with our words, right? So use your imagination and do it. Use your words, use your narration, describe what's happening. It's gonna be so much more interesting. Don't just describe the numbers to hit and damage and do math. That's lame and boring. No one wants to play in a D&D combat like that. No one. Now, game masters be like, well, Luke, my players don't do that. They can't do that stuff. Okay, well, that's great. As the game master, set the example by describing what your monsters are doing and how they react to the players' attacks against them. You're the leader of the group. Be a leader. Set an example. Describe. Use your words. And then encourage your players to describe how they do things and how they react. Critical hits and critical misses and killing blows are great times for that. Just ask them, what does that look like? Or would you like to describe that? Word of warning, not everything warrants flowery descriptions. You can bog the game down to all levels of swampery if you describe every little thing in intricate detail, and you can narrate your whole game into the grave doing that. You can go overboard. You need balance. Keep your descriptions colorful but succinct. The best times for cool descriptions are critical hits, critical misses, normal hits and misses maybe, but I usually tend not to do those in my games because you can't go too overboard, right? Notice my previous rant. Near misses, monster deaths, and PC deaths. All great times to do some narration and all that good jazz. But Luke, I'm not good at descriptions. That's the cry of many a viewer of this video, I'm sure. You're telling me to use my words, but I got no words, Luke. I got no words. Okay, so to get good with your descriptive words, you need to read first. That's how I learned how to describe crap, by reading. You read lots of descriptions. It comes into your brain through the written word, and then it sticks in there, and then when you need to go describe something, all that stuff just tends to resurface and you can pick from it and use it and assemble stuff. Works pretty well. My suggestion is to pick up some fantasy books and get at it. I definitely recommend Ari Salvatore's Drizzt series. There's a link below to it. Okay, I'm not recommending him because he's the very best, wonderful, most greatest author out there. I like his stuff. If you want an awesome, wonderful author that's like the top of the top, that's not why I'm recommending the dude. I'm recommending the dude because he is a master of combat descriptions, in my opinion. Other authors, like Robert Jordan, tend to skip over the details of combat descriptions for the most part. Their books are still immensely enjoyable, but if you're specifically there to learn how to describe combat with words, then those other authors might not do it for you. Ari Salvatore definitely will. And then while you're reading, take notes, observe how the author uses words to describe things in combat, expand your vocabulary, and then you gotta practice. You gotta practice at home. Dude, you could just pull up a Word document or a notepad and just try to write a narrative description of combat. Practice writing this stuff. I wrote many manuscripts for many fantasy novels, none of them published, of course, but it was great practice for narrative description of all things, but especially combat. And then of course, practice in your gaming group. You're gonna feel rough at first, it's gonna be hard, you're gonna stumble and stutter, but you gotta stick through it and practice. Number 3, allow all players to participate in the combat. Somebody's gonna be like, Luke, you're a moron. Come on, are you stretching for numbers? You got nothing else for us? I know, it seems like a no-brainer. It seems like such a no-brainer to let everybody participate in the combat, doesn't it? Look, combat is the most time-consuming part of the game by the very nature of how it's designed in the rules systems. That's not a knock, because I love combat and I love spending lots of time in combat. It's lots of fun. But it is a fact, combat takes a while. So if a player is basically not playing the game for long stretches of time because they are out of the combat, that will probably make the game much less interesting for them. It's like being invited over to a friend's house to play a game, you know, might be called D&D or Call of Cthulhu or something, and then you sit there all excited and you don't get to play. That might be a boring night for you. I don't know. Okay, so specifics. Here are how to let all of your players participate in the combat. Number 1, keeping the party together. Split parties present a problem. They do. You know, the moment the party splits into 2, this group could get into a combat that could take quite some time to resolve. These players over here are not in the combat. They're just going about doing their own ordinary thing over here. So you're gonna spend lots of time with this group working through their combat that doesn't take but like under a minute in the actual game. And these guys over here, because they're not in combat and the rules are more streamlined and things progress a lot faster, are gonna be sitting there waiting around quite a bit as you resolve things with the guys that are in combat. Now, yes, you are going to flip back and forth between narrating both groups. You do a little bit of combat, you go over here and talk to these guys. Do a little bit of combat, go over here and talk to these guys. But by the very nature of how this is gonna work, you're still gonna have most of the time focused on that combat. And these dudes over here are not gonna be engaged as much in the game. The second big thing is to avoid using spells or abilities that effectively remove a player character from the combat. Examples of these are Banishment, Wall of Force, Polymorph, and similar spells like that. As a game master, I rarely use these spells on my players. The simple fact of the matter is that if I banish a player, they're not in the combat anymore. They're gone. They're pretty much gone. Now, Luke, you know, you can interrupt the concentration, stuff like that. That's great, but what if they don't? What if that player sits out of the game for, I don't know, a half an hour as that combat's being resolved? That dude's not having fun, is he? Polymorph him into a clam and put him in your pocket. He's out of the game, right? Wall of Force. Dude, half of the party could be sealed off and not able to do anything, and they're sitting there watching, bored out of their skulls. So, as a game master, I use those sorts of spells that remove players from the game seldomly. So, Luke is not saying that you should never allow the party to split up. Luke is not saying to never use those spells. I am simply saying that you need to be aware of their effects on the game and on player fun and use them ideally sparingly, but at least use them intelligently, knowing what you're doing. Number 4, pacing. Look, ladies and gentlemen, you gotta keep combat moving quickly. If the action is moving quickly, it will hold people's interest a whole lot better. If it is moving as slow as molasses, people are far more likely to get bored. It's combat. It's fast-paced. Turns shouldn't take forever. Now, I am not saying that fast combat equals interesting and fun combat. You could have a very fast combat that's boring and horrible, but if you have a slow combat, the chances of it being boring are far greater. So there's not like a reverse-inverse relationship, but there's definitely slow combat could very well be boring combat relationship. The number 1 biggest recommendation I can give you for speeding up combat, the biggest thing that slows combat down is players taking a long time to make up their minds of what they're going to do on their turns and then resolving those things. Or saying they're going to do one thing, the dungeon master like explaining how it actually works because they don't really know how their character or spells work, and then they're like, well, then I wouldn't do that. Let me do this thing instead. Oh, well, actually, it doesn't work that way. Oh, well, then I wouldn't do that either. I would actually do this. And you sit there for like 20 minutes because they don't know how to use their character or spells, and you're adjudicating and they're changing their mind. Yeah, let's try to avoid that, shall we? So if you can get your players to like make up their minds about what they're gonna do within a few seconds, under 10 seconds, it would be great. Then your combat is just gonna be lightning speed compared to what it otherwise would be. The classic example of this is the wizard taking like 15 minutes to decide what spell to cast. This happens in one of my games right now. Would love the spellcaster to be just a tad bit faster sometimes. My players watching this video are gonna be like, wait, is that me? Am I that spellcaster? And I guarantee you, I guarantee you the dude knows who he is, and he's like, yeah, Luke, I know. By the way, if you want more ways to increase the speed of your combats, I do have a 12 steps to faster combat and D&D video. There's gonna be a link below and maybe up here in this card that you can click, to see how to speed your combat up. Number 5. Combat is more than hit points and damage. So you got the orcs are standing there and they're swinging and doing damage, and the players are standing there and they're swinging and doing damage, and I swing and I do damage, and you swing and you do damage, you swing and damage. So it's just like damage and hit points, and we're just doing math and we're reducing numbers. We might be describing things, but we're still just kind of standing there and just doing damage and reducing hit point pools. That's really all we're doing around here. Yeah, that gets boring too, pretty quickly, when every single combat is just a matter of standing there, swinging your weapons and dealing damage and reducing hit point pools. So what am I saying? You need dynamic elements. You need something more exciting going on in a combat than just standing there swinging your weapons and doing damage. So what could we do? We could have environmental effects. Terrain can be used. You could have a doorway that an enemy spellcaster is popping around, firing, and then popping back, and the player's got to figure out how are we gonna get at this guy, but he's got a front line of fighters here, we gotta get past them somehow. Oh look, there's a pit in the middle of the room that some of the enemies are trying to shove us into. Holy crap, every so often spikes shoot out of the wall and hit random parts of the room. We gotta be careful and not do that. There's a river of lava running through the room, and we gotta navigate around it as we're being attacked and firing back and stuff like that. There's a multitude of different things you can do to make the environment more interesting. Enemies can do more than just deal damage as well. They can inflict conditions. They need interesting actions, magic, spells they can cast, magical abilities that they have. You need to have things that bad guys can do besides just stand there and swing their weapons and do damage. In my personal opinion, giants in D&D 5th edition are one of the most boring monsters in the entire book. They're just big sacks of hit points that do damage, and they do nothing else. It's absolutely horrible. I've been reading more and more of the Tome of Beasts by Kobold Press, and I gotta tell you, I am very impressed by how many interesting abilities and things that most of the various monsters appear to be able to do. I haven't read them all quite yet. Those are big books, let me tell you. But it's great when your monsters can do special things, inflict conditions, and have magical abilities. It is a breath of fresh air compared to some of the things in the monster manual, be honest right there. Enemies can do more than just try to maim and kill. They can try to kidnap a PC. They can try to steal their things. Now, if you want more suggestions on how to create encounters and make them more interesting and all that sort of thing, I do have an encounter creation series on my channel. I will put a link below and maybe up in a card in different places if you want to go take a look at that. Remember, if you're a game master looking to reduce your prep time and improve your games, become a DM Lair patron at the link below and start getting a new issue of Lair magazine every single month. Also, don't forget to follow me over on Twitch for weekly Q&A live streams where you can ask me your own D&D questions. If you enjoyed the invigorating Game Master advice I gave today, give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment for the algorithm down below. Let YouTube know that I don't completely suck. And until next time, let's not put our players to sleep during combat, shall we?